Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Masterclass. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we start, let me just say that we're having these Masterclasses once every 2 weeks on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. UK time. So make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and stay tuned as we share all of our upcoming events there. So today we are joined by Ardiana Ismajli. I think I'm saying that correctly. She's an LSDM student finishing her bachelor's degree in design. Throughout her life, Ardiana has always found herself gravitating towards artistic and creative endeavors that allowed her to express herself in unique and meaningful ways. She believes that creativity is about thinking outside the box. It's about problem solving and innovating. And the best way to develop creativity is by working with others, experimenting with new ideas, and pushing the boundaries of what is possible. And with that in mind, she developed her bachelor's final project called Design Your Mentality, A Promise to Myself, a mental health campaign raising awareness on imposter syndrome. In the end, we will open the session for a short Q&A. However, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use the chat box or just raise your hand during Zoom. Ardiana, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be here today and sharing your work with us. The stage is all yours.
Thank you once again, of course, for having me as well. It's such an honor for me to be able to present my work to all of you, and I hope you can enjoy it a little bit. I'm very nervous, but I'll try my best to stay as calm as possible. So, as you've already heard, I'm basically talking about a mental health campaign today, specifically about imposter syndrome, which is something I feel like a lot of people can relate to. So it's just given that that's something we should talk about more. So let's start off with the overview. Basically, what I'm going to start off with is my personal background. I'm going to talk a little bit about my university first, the LSDM. And then I want to talk about why I chose the imposter syndrome and why I chose to put some more awareness onto it, some more emphasis on it. And finally, I will talk about the project development, which basically means how I then ended up concluding or putting up a campaign idea for this entire project. And I'll show you the strategies and tactics I used for it, basically. So starting right off, I found it really important to kind of start off with the idea of why I chose LSDM as my personal career path. Due to the corona pandemic, a lot of unprecedented disruptions had been brought up in our daily lives, obviously, which also includes the education system. Social distancing measures were implemented. Many schools and universities were even forced to close down their physical campuses, and some even stopped accepting international students at all, which is also something I struggled with and which I had a hard time really coming through or going through, actually. The shift was quite quickly noticeable, which is online learning, obviously. Online study programs started gaining more and more attention and popularity, and for a number of different reasons, which is ultimately why I decided to pursue one myself as well. I have 4 big aspects I want to talk about. First is safety. By studying remotely, the students are able to avoid the risk of contracting or even spreading the virus through face-to-face interactions. The next thing is flexibility. Everybody learns at their own pace, using individual methods too. Nothing compares to an online program when it comes to creating and providing flexible structures and systems, obviously. Then access, funnily enough, this is one of the aspects that heavily fueled my own personal imposter syndrome. With the pressure of society and expectations, it can be incredibly difficult to find suitable universities that not only correspond to one's own needs, but also even accept you. So that's basically something I will dwell into a little bit more later on as well. And then lastly, adaptability. Online study programs are designed and thus meant to be adaptable to changing circumstances. So in that sense, or especially in regards to the pandemic, it was clear that already established programs had the upper hand when it came to managing and organization from their courses. Now, on to the second question, why is the imposter syndrome so important? Imposter syndrome has seemingly gained a greater attention, not only in popular media, but also in academic research in recent years. Articles, books, videos, and podcasts even are being created and dedicated to exploring the experience of imposter syndrome. Even companies and organizations have started to recognize the impact on their employees' well-being and performance. Of course, their health as well. In that sense, strategies for managing it are being provided and more implemented into the daily lives of those who might struggle with imposter syndrome. There are mentoring and coaching programs, employee resource groups, and other more generalized mental health resources. However, even despite this apparent growth in awareness, it is still hard to see any great impact it had so far. I believe a lot of people, when they've been explained to, know what the imposter syndrome is, but just out of the blue or just without any context might not even know that they personally have experienced it as well. The syndrome in that sense remains pervasive and often underreported. In that sense, many individuals feel ashamed or even embarrassed to admit their struggles and may not seek out the help that they are entitled to and should seek out to. So while the awareness is still spreading and continues to grow, we do need to put some more work into it in order to promote and implement a greater understanding of the subject. This is also what this project obviously in particular focuses on. To achieve the aims of the project on imposter syndrome, certain actions had to be taken or must be taken. These objectives need to be specific so that data research is necessary to understand the issue more clearly. The campaign is trying to achieve these objectives and can only do that if they utilize the gathered data in a meaningful way. The goals of this campaign, once again, are to increase awareness, educate the public, influence attitudes and behaviors, while also encouraging new action, taking action in terms of creating a change. To ensure the success of the campaign, the goal must be internalized and measured for effectiveness. Research is necessary to understand the issue, its target audience, and potential supporters and opponents. Launching the campaign requires the right strategies and tactics to influence the target audience. Communication, as well as psychological and social intervention, are crucial. The project's aim is to investigate the psychology behind imposter syndrome to create a broader perspective on the issue. Self-help, this is one of the big factors that I personally want to advocate for, is a direct counterpart to professional help and can take various forms, such as literature, speeches, or lectures. Awareness is vital in recognizing gaps in general knowledge about imposter syndrome and filling these gaps with information beyond existing beliefs. The desire for improvement and evolution is essential for the success. Raising awareness about the topic is important because it can lead to a greater understanding, education, and action. It can also increase empathy, dispel myths, and combat stigmas. and inspire the systematic change. Spreading awareness can be done through social media, advocacy efforts, or grassroots organizations, and can be a powerful tool for promoting positive change. Now, onto the data research. So what exactly did I find out while working on my project? What was it that I was particularly searching for, or kind of trying to decipher? The methods I used for this were particularly just online research. I thought about having some sort of questionnaire and asking people about their experience. However, I think it's such a personal matter that maybe not a lot of people would like to share their ideas as well, or their thoughts and emotions. So let's just get started into it, basically. Now, the first question is, what is a campaign? Campaign follows us throughout our entire lives. In most cases, they are used for promotional purposes. It is a coordinated series of actions or events that are undertaken in order to achieve a particular goal. In a multifaceted concept that summarizes the analysis, planning, and implementation of a defined issue or topic. In this case, obviously, it is the imposter syndrome, but also focuses a little bit on mental health in a general sense. Campaigns can be conducted by individuals, groups, or even organizations. The focus ranges from political, social, and environmental issues and causes to commercial objectives. Social campaigns, such as this one, focus on awareness, as we've already mentioned. And on top of that, they also seek to influence the public's attitudes and behaviors, especially related to the issue. The specific tactics and strategies used will depend on the goals of the campaign, as well as the audience to whom the message is directed to. In that sense, it is crucial to have a clear and measurable objective so that they can be evaluated for their effectiveness in achieving its goal. Consisting of team play, campaigns can never try to waste any potential resources, energies, or time. In that sense, they've created some of the grandest campaigns for awareness in regards to injustices around the world or in history in general. Onto the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon in which individuals doubt their accomplishments and have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. It is often characterized by feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, despite the evidence of the contrary. These feelings can be very damaging and can prevent people from reaching their full potential. Imposter syndrome is thought to be particularly common among high-achieving individuals and may be due to a combination of factors, including perfectionism, neuroticism, and a lack of support or recognition. It can have a negative impact on both personal and professional relationships. The term imposter syndrome was first coined in 1978 by a clinical psychologist, Pauline R. Clance, and Suzanne A. Eames. They observed that many people or many successful individuals, mainly women, struggled with imposterous feelings despite having evident accomplishments in their careers and general life. Those who are affected attribute their success to external factors, such as luck or just sheer convenience. Both perfectionism and neuroticism are important factors to keep in mind throughout the entirety of this project. Many utilize the two terminologies interchangeably for the imposter syndrome, but a clear distinction needs to be made at all times. Because when we look at it, perfectionism is the belief that perfection is attainable and that anything less than perfection is just simply unacceptable, wrong, or whatever. This belief often drives the individual to set excessively high standards for themselves and others and become overly critical, specifically self-critical. In that sense, perfectionism can manifest in various ways, including a need for control, a fear of failure, and a tendency to procrastinate, which initially sounds a little bit wrong, but it makes sense if you think about it. The more you focus on being perfect or achieving your perfect goals, the more you might be taken aback from the action that you actually have to take. It can lead to feelings of anxiety and depression even, also low self-esteem. While a certain level of perfectionism can be helpful in some situations, an excessive amount can be detrimental for both mental and physical health. Additionally to that, neuroticism is perceived as a personality trait that is characterized by a proneness to negative emotions, also including anxiety and depression, but also anger. Those who score in neuroticism are more likely to be emotionally reactive, usually in a cynical, frequent, and intense manner. They may also be generally sensitive to stress and extensive psychological distress. Neuroticism is one of the 5 main personality traits and is thus often measured using the 5-factor model of personality, which you can see on the screen right now. It is thought to be influenced by both genetic and environmental factors. The 5-factor model of personality is a widely used model that describes personality in terms of 5 broad dimensions: openness, neuroticism, consciousness, agreeableness, and finally, neuroticism. These dimensions are thought to capture the most important aspects of personality and are thus used to describe differences in personalities. So as we've already mentioned, individuals with imposter syndrome may feel like they don't deserve the success and just simply got lucky or are faking everything that they've achieved so far. There are many potential reasons as to why someone might suffer from imposter syndrome. Some common causes can be perfectionism, obviously, which we've already talked about in depth, which means people set an unrealistically high standard for themselves and are thus more prone to imposter syndrome because they feel like they can never meet their own expectations. Then another point is the upbringing, which can also be sort of seen as a genetic factor, or at least can be coined with the genetic factor. Individuals who were raised to believe that their own worth is tied to their achievements may feel like they're constantly falling short and are not good enough. Another point would be comparison to others. Constantly comparing oneself to others and feeling like they are not as talented or accomplished and can contribute to feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome. And lastly, we have lack of representation. Being a member of an underrepresented group in a particular field can lead to feeling like an outsider and doubting one's abilities. This point in particular, you will see throughout the presentation as well. There's a few more situations where it will be brought up. Overall, it is important to recognize that imposter syndrome is a common experience and many successful and accomplished people suffer from it. In that sense, you're never really alone, even if you think so, or even if you want to believe so. Now here you can see the 5 emotions once again, and maybe whilst I'll go ahead with my presentation, you can sort of create a picture for yourself as well. Expectations from others, as well as general pressure from society, can have a significant impact on an individual's mental health and well-being. When people feel like they're not meeting the expectations of others or society's particular, they may experience stress, anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. One of the most significant challenges of societal pressure is that it can create an unrealistic expectation for individuals to live up to. For example, society may place pressure on people to have a certain job or get married or have children by a certain age. When individuals then don't feel like they can amount to these things or can even get close to these expectations, they may experience a sense of failure and inadequacy. Additionally, the pressure to conform to societal norms and expectations can create a sense of alienation. You feel like you don't really fit in anymore, and you feel like you're the odd one out, something like that. For instance, individuals who identify as LGBTQ+ may feel like they are not accepted by society and struggle with self-doubt and insecurity as a result. Expectations from others, such as family members, friends, or colleagues, can also create significant pressure. For instance, parents may have certain expectations for their children's academic and career paths, while managers may have expectations for their employees to meet certain performances. When individuals feel like they are not meeting these expectations, they may experience feeling of shame or guilt. You feel like you owe whoever you've indebted yourself to something. All of these factors can contribute to significant mental turmoil. Individuals may feel like they're not good enough or that they are letting others down. They may experience anxiety, depression, or other mental health issues as a result. It is important to recognize the impact that societal pressure and expectations from others can have on the mental health. Seeking support from a therapist or a counselor can be helpful in situations like these. Now, imposter syndrome can also be difficult to differentiate from insecurities or self-doubts, or both of them, simply because it is not classified as a personality or mental health disorder. So you don't have this clear cut as to it being an actual syndrome and being actually something that medical staff members might have to assess you for, which then raises questions. Where does the imposter syndrome start and where do insecurities end? Are these two interchangeable or not? Insecurities are feelings of inadequacy and uncertainty and are often particularly related to specific situations, goals, relationships, or body images. That being said, the main causes can also vary, from traumatic events, social conditioning, or chemical imbalances. It is best to treat and manage them accordingly. While insecurities can contribute to imposter syndrome, they do not define it. On the other hand, or additionally to that, self-doubt can be described as some sort of low-level insecurity. It is not inherently something bad, but it can be a sign of low self-esteem, amongst other causes and reasons. However, with an increasing amount of self-doubt, and especially over an unspecified period of time, an individual can develop some sort of insecurity. In my personal opinion, the imposter syndrome itself is far too complex to just coin or put into the same category as insecurities or self-doubt. It can and then also is never just situational based, which means that there's a clear difference in that. Recognizing the possible stages leading up to the so-called imposter syndrome can definitely help to identify the problem and create a more comprehensive understanding of the issue. In that sense, maybe you start to realize, okay, I'm doubting myself more and more these days. I've kind of developed insecurities now. And if this continues to go, it just might be the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome represents a psychological pattern that can have severe impact on the mental health. It can make a person doubt their accomplishments and success, leading to anxiety, depression, and generalized stress, as we've already heard so far. One of the primary reasons as to why imposter syndrome can lead to mental health problems is the constant pressure and need that the person feels to prove themselves. It can cause a constant state of anxiety and stress with tendencies for hypervigilant behavior, where the individual is always looking for signs of failure or criticism from others. As you can see here, we have a little bit of a statistic going on, which basically talks about mental health disorders in general. And as you can see over the years, it just continues to grow. I would say it's somewhat equal between both the genders, male and female. So there's nothing inherently we can differentiate here. But overall, it can be said that there's just a general growth going on, which does not only mean that there are more and more cases, but also that people feel more and more are more and more willing to truly express themselves and share their thoughts and emotions with others, because it is more and more acceptable these days. Now, about the demographic in general, it can be said that it has kind of shifted over the years. I've talked about how it initially started off being more so about influential and highly successful women. However, I believe that there was some sort of change around the 80s, 1980s in particular, where studies more and more found out that some minority groups may be affected by it more so as well. A specific group I can mention are African Americans in the USA, simply because they feel inadequate to their peers, basically, or to other people living in the United States. And yeah, it's difficult to generalize a specific group of people simply because, as I've already mentioned before, the imposter syndrome is something that almost everybody will feel eventually or at some point in their life. Now, as data research is concluded, we can move on to into the further process, which is utilizing the newly gathered information. This step also requires techniques and planning, obviously, to fully execute it. When creating the right campaign, we have to clearly define the objectives, identify the target audience, develop a message, choose channels, create content, and finally, obviously, execute the campaign. Some of you may have already detected all of those things while I've talked about them, but this particular campaign is incredibly adaptable, in my opinion, and can thus inspire people all over the world to make a change, creating an impact on society, forcing it to acknowledge the imposter syndrome and further opening up the conversation. However, a promise to myself also puts pressure on the affected individuals. The loss of control over one's own body and mind can have a numbing and paralyzing effect. This campaign wants to fight against these issues, making the individual believe their own powers are distributed back towards themselves. This is one thing that the campaign also wants to achieve. Now, onto these strategies, I've already mentioned that there's quite a lot of them. And the first thing would be, or the first medium you could use, are formal statements. Campaigns are always systematic, and thus approaches, methods, and ideations are thoroughly thought through, and thus go through a number of processes before actually being put into realization. It is important to know how to gather and influence an audience in an impactful and meaningful manner. In that sense, there's a variety of different methods of non-violent protest and persuasion, formal statements being one of them. For this campaign in particular, public speeches as well as formal statements matter the most. That being said, the differences between public speeches and formal statements need to be examined as well. Formal statements are statements that can either be written or spoken in a specific prescribed manner. In that sense, often according to certain rules or conventions. They can be found in many different contexts, including legal documents, academic papers, business reports, or also official announcements. In general, formal statements are used in situations where precision, clarity, and accuracy are essential, and where the language is used carefully, considered as well as structured. Examples of formal statements include court verdicts, company missions, statements, scientific hypotheses, and in this specific sense, public speeches and letters of support or opposition. Public speeches present the idea of transmitting information by speaking to a live audience, that being in a traditional sense. Their purpose can differ from teaching to persuasion or even to entertainment. In past times, speeches used to present the main source of attaining information and knowledge. Obviously, back in the day when nobody really knew how to write, or only a select number of people, that was how information was being spread. Utilizing the right techniques will captivate the target audience and resultingly spread awareness of the campaign's goal. This example in particular produces an emotional connection with the audience and creates a sense of union for those who feel affected. It strengthens the community, resulting in beneficial impacts for the campaign. Now, we have two documents, obviously. I have not really prepared them for you to read or anything, because I believe it's always something that needs to be more detailed and precisely done, because obviously statements of opposition mean that you disagree with somebody. So an example that I came up with is can be schools, for instance. You can kind of critique schools or education systems in general in a meaningful manner, where you just kind of put the focus back onto the individuals who learn, the students, the pupils, whatever. And on the other hand, a letter of support just can be to anyone. It can be to supporters in general, so people who follow the campaign and can just showcase gratitude, also some sort of affection to those who joined the war, basically. Now, there's also something that you can do in a public statement, obviously, some sort of speech or something. This will also depend on where you can hold it, where you're allowed to hold it. If there's an event, you can hold it, or maybe have some sort of speech at a school, once again, something like that. So it will also every time differ heavily. Now, effectively communicating with a wider audience is an important aspect, not only for the project development, but also for data research. It involves conveying the results of the research in a clear and concise manner, using language and visualization that can be easily understood by the intended audience. This can be achieved through the use of communication methods, such as reports or presentations. The idea behind it is sharing information or ideas with a large number of people, typically through some sort of mass media, like television, radio, or in today's day and age, more so the internet. These aspects can help to specify and tailor a message that needs to bring the interest of the target audience into the light. Furthermore, there are 4 points that we can pinpoint that need to be taken into account when preparing the communication process. We need to know the intended audience, the purpose of the communication, the content of the communication, and obviously, once again, the delivery of it. Now, on to a little bit of a more visual method, I suppose. This campaign also focuses on putting the ones affected by the imposter syndrome into the spotlight, making them the main character of this entire project. They are being pushed into an action and are asked to allow the campaign to help them help themselves. Crossed fingers placed over the eyes, symbolizing a promise to oneself, making towards oneself. Following this ideology, the campaigners are meant to make promises to themselves. The initial title will help with relatability and create a sense of union. A promise that is being made here in particular is defined by fighting against the urges, thoughts, and insecurities that are brought upon the individual by the imposter syndrome. The slogan, achieve, perceive, never fall prey to disbelief, further underlines the intention of the project and strengthens those involved into believing in themselves, rather than clinging to self-doubt and imposterous thoughts. Choosing a color palette as well, which is something you were able to detect throughout this presentation as well, is something that can also further create a more deep bond with the audience or with the people who join the support. Now, display communication kind of summarizes both of the grand aspects that we've just talked about. It is a very visual process, but also highly communicative. Displayed communication refers to any type of communication that is physically displayed or presented to others for others to see. This can include both written or visual messages that are displayed in public spaces, such as billboards in form of posters, banners, or messages that are displayed on a screen, like on television or a computer monitor. This can be highly effective in a way that it reaches a large amount of people, as it allows the message to be seen by many people at once. It can also be a good way to communicate important information or messages that need to be conveyed in a fast and concise manner. We also have posters, obviously. I feel like they're almost interchangeable, whether it is a poster or a banner really depends on the format only. You can basically put both into the same thing. These banners that I have created are meant to be just simple and coherent in choice of color. They are meant to represent what the target audience is thinking and giving them a voice through the banners. Now on to another piece of paper, I suppose. A brochure is a printed document that provides information about a product, service, or organization. In this context, it's obviously about the campaign. Now, brochures specifically always have a reason with them. In this case, I think I would utilize brochures specifically to invite people for a meetup, for some sort of course or something like that. And as you can see, I've also mentioned some topics that may be discussed throughout one of these courses. Yeah. News article or newspaper and journals. Articles are important because they provide information about current events and issues that are happening around the world. They help to keep the public informed about what is going on in their community, their country, or the world at large. They can provide data that impacts people's life around the topics of politics, economics, and social issues. It can then help the reader to make more informed decisions about how to participate in the world. Additionally, news articles can serve as a record of historical events, documenting what happened and how it was perceived at the time. Working together with a local paper not only helps to raise awareness about the campaign, but can also kind of con the imposter syndrome itself. Now, digital communication is probably what we see happening or what we see in general majority of the time these days. In modern day society, obviously everything and anything needs to be digitalized in some way or another. It has become an important aspect of our daily lives and thus describes how we work and function. Digital communication grants great opportunities for convenience purposes, general efficiency, cost effectiveness, the ability to reach a wide audience, once again, and access to information. It is an important tool for staying connected, but also for sharing data and conducting business in today's age. Advertisement and promotion of this project will be done in both physical and digital manners, or at least that's what it should be, allowing the best of both worlds and ideally targeting different groups of individuals, working with QR codes, for instance, and thus creating easy access to potential websites, apps, and other related campaigns may possibly present the best option here. Now, taking into account the idea of a precise app, it needs to be able to collect, distribute, and showcase resource materials on the imposter syndrome through seminars, but also through users' input, for instance. So maybe something similar to Wikipedia, where people can include their own articles, basically. It also has to remind the user of events and special dates regarding the campaign, for instance, schedules for seminars. And lastly, it needs room for self-expression, something like a journal or something like diary entries, something that they can maybe just let their thoughts splurge out. Now, symbolic public acts are actions and events that are intended to convey a message, represent a belief, or promote values in a visible public way. They are often used to or as a form of protest, or just simply raise awareness about the particular issue and cause behind the campaign. These acts can take a variety of forms, for example, marches, rallies, boycotts, or other types of demonstrations. These public acts represent a productive way to bring attention to the desired topic and can further even help to express solidarity with the others who share similar beliefs or values. They can also be used to influence public opinions and policy decisions, putting pressure on governmental or societal organizations and actually forcing them into taking actions. However, a risk here is that this form of nonviolent convincement can be considered controversial, while also not being accepted or supported by other members of society. In that sense, the actions regarded for this specific campaign thus focus on being silent and more so expressive. Now, another more physical method you can use is having people wear symbols. Symbols can be an important way for people to express themselves or their identity, even their beliefs, their values, or affiliations. By wearing a symbol, someone can communicate something about themselves to others, whether it is a public statement, a cultural tradition, or a personal expression of faith, even without the use of any words at all. In some cases, symbols can also serve as a form of solidarity or unity, bringing people together who share similar experiences, struggles, and lifestyles. It is worth noting that symbols can have various meanings in different contexts, and that some symbols may be seen as more controversial and divisive than others. True beauty lies within being able to interpret individually. Symbols can often spark up a conversation and thus spread the message even more. For this campaign particularly, stickers, merchandise, and symbolic acts may be the way to go. Now, painting is another thing that a lot of people do throughout campaigns. Paint has been used as a form of protest in various ways throughout history. One example is the use of graffiti or street art to make political statements or to raise awareness about social issues. Famously known Banksy portrays the prime precedent for this method. Graffiti can be a way for people to express their views or to communicate their messages with a wider audience. And it has been used in this way by various social movements and activists all over the world. Furthermore, paint can also be used in a more traditional form of protest, such as painting signs or banners to carry during demonstrations and marches. These signs and banners can be used to convey the intended message or a slogan. They can be particularly effective at drawing attention to the cause. Lastly, this campaign wants to be more expressive and put this ideology on its supporters too. Starting social media events or contests where personal creations around the topic of imposter syndrome can be shared and showcased will modernize the approach of painting as a protest. Now we have the two intervention methods, basically. First being psychological public acts. Psychological intervention is a term to describe a range of treatments, or in a further sense, even therapies that are designed to address mental health issues, while particularly improving one's psychological well-being. Some of the commonly discussed topics include depression, anxiety, trauma, and substance abuse, amongst others. This is especially important to note, taking into consideration the consequences or effects of imposter syndrome over a specific period of time. Although the techniques always vary, the goal may be common. It is basically all about reducing symptoms of mental health disorders, also preventing the development of mental health disorders, improving coping skills and resilience, enhancing overall well-being and quality of life, helping individuals understand and resolve emotional and psychological conflicts, and lastly, improving relationships and communication skills. Psychological interventions can be delivered in many distinctive settings, such as hospitals, schools, universities, working places, and community centers. They are often provided by mental health professionals like psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and counseling therapists. It is important to choose a qualified and knowledgeable individual in order to experience appropriate training and expertise in addressing specific needs and concerns. The overall key of this nonviolent intervention is to offer self-exposure to the element for the target audience. Now, social intervention is similar. It refers to the efforts to address social problems or challenges in a community or society. This type of nonviolent intervention method can take many forms, varying from policy changes, programs, and services, as well as community-based initiatives. Similar to previously mentioned method, there are also some shared goals within the ideas of social interventions. For instance, once again, improving the well-being and promoting social justice, enhancing social cohesion and promoting a sense of belonging and connection, addressing issues such as poverty, unemployment, crime, substance abuse, and suicidal thoughts, and promoting healthy behaviors and lifestyle changes. Social interventions can be implemented at different levels, from local to national. They may be designed and administered by government agencies, nonprofit organizations, community groups, or a combination of these. It is important to carefully design and evaluate these interventions to ensure that they are effective in achieving the desired goal. They also need to generally possess the ability to create a positive impact on the people and communities they serve. The ultimate goal is to establish new social patterns, making room for awareness and acceptance around the imposter syndrome, and changing the way for the general public. Now, the initial idea behind Design Your Mentality followed the main goal of offering education through presentations or seminars. This concept can especially be useful when combined with the aspect of social intervention. In order to make change happen, people need to learn how to function and handle certain situations instead. Teaching others key information about communication and personalities can highly benefit the cause of this campaign and can further strengthen the feeling of union among the community, as well as just kind of put the issues into relation. Now, on to the conclusion. I kind of want to summarize this whole thing and then just quickly talk about the initial beginnings of this campaign. Any campaign of such wide scope can only ever truly function with the help of a reliable and professional team. Considering the work provided up until this point, this campaign is solely represented in its basic early stages. Everything that has been learned and discovered so far has contributed to the creation of a strong fundament. A promise to myself simply starts off as a general message, which is then spread and equally contributed to many different members of society. Campaigns, as they grow, become more and more serious and detailed over time. The more supporters a project carries, the more opportunities, resources, and further ideas can be built or founded on top of the existing base. This project in particular initially puts a heavy focus on the first promotions and advertisement of the project. And in the future, this campaign can highly benefit from animators, professional therapists, more general mental health advocates, and developers, amongst others. Staying motivated through team efforts always allows this project to grow and blossom into a worldwide renowned title where everybody is following in the idea behind a promise to myself. This project initially started off as a way for me to summarize my studies, basically, my course lectures, in a way that also helped with mental health. And once it was time to work on this final assignment, I decided to put this into the focus of it all. I wanted to create something where people feel like, oh, okay, I can use so many different things, information, data, or knowledge that I know by myself and put them into good use for not only the general public, but also for me, for my mental health. And yeah, that's basically what Design Your Mentality is all about.
Thank you, Ardiana. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I think it has been a very insightful presentation and a very interesting topic, because although nowadays we see more people talk about this, it's still not that known. So it's really important to raise awareness on it. I don't know if anyone has any questions for Ardiana. Feel free to share them in the chat box or just open your mics. I can ask a question myself if no one has. Okay. I was wondering, why did you choose this theme, this imposter syndrome, for your project? Was it something that you felt were experiencing, or was it just a topic that you were interested in and wanted to research more about it?
Oh, for sure. It was definitely a mixture of different things, because as said, initially the project started off being me summarizing what I've learned in lessons and putting them into something that can be used for a completely different topic. So for instance, design methods, I think, was one of the things I mentioned. I've used them and implemented them into a mental health, self-help kind of thing. This idea initially was a little bit too vague, though, so I had to make it more precise and create something more, I guess, grabbable in that sense. And yeah, imposter syndrome just came up in that sense. It was also kind of brought up in the conversation, and since I've felt like I've dealt with something like that, or at least experienced it a few times here and there, I thought it's something that needs to be talked about more.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ardiana?
No, I just want, if I may, just to comment on your presentation. Congratulations on the design work. It looks super beautiful. And I have a challenge for you. I know that this was not included in your campaign, but why not thinking about a book or an ebook about this topic? Because you have such a wonderful work done. So I think it would be really nice to have a cool publication on this topic.
That means a lot to me. I've thought about it too, actually. I've even wanted to put it into the project itself, but it just would have been too much work at once. So definitely looking forward to it. It's also one thing that maybe the future of Design Your Mentality.
Good. You should. Congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if there are no more questions, I think we can end this masterclass here. I want to thank you, Ardiana, for this time with us and for accepting our invitation to
Thank
being
you.
here. And I want to thank all of our guests for joining us. And I hope you have a rest of a great day and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.